We've seen decades of debate on women's reservation in policy making, but now it's a non-negotiable national priority. Greater representation of women will translate into tangible outcomes beyond politics, be it economy, social justice, or governance. But what does Nari Shakti look like on the global stage? And to answer that, we are joined by Lakshmi Puri, former Assistant Secretary General UN and Deputy Executive Director of UN Women. Lakshmi Puri speaks as a global gender equality advocate who successfully led the first ever global organization to promote gender equality and women's empowerment for 7 foundational years. She has won several awards for her work, including the prestigious Eleanor Roosevelt Human Rights Award for her championing of women's rights. She has been engaged in promoting women's political, social and economic empowerment agenda around the world and feels passionately about each piece of it. She is going to be in conversation with Hina Gambhir, news editor, Times Now. Please join me in welcoming Lakshmi Puri and my colleague Hina Gambhir on the stage. A huge round of applause, please.
A bigger round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Ms. Lakshmi Puri. Always a pleasure to speak with you. It's a very interesting moment that we are, looking at today. We're in the midst of history that's going to write our future, write our country's future. So I want to begin by asking you, what does this moment really mean for you as a woman?
As not only a woman, but one who has worked on this agenda, on women's empowerment agenda around the world, for me and for India, we are at the edge of a revolution. If this and when this amendment, that is 106th amendment, which is before Parliament passes, then we are really going to be seeing the most consequential structural reform in India's democracy since the universal franchise at our independence. And that's what the women of India deserve, who constitute 1/6 of humanity. And this is going to make her story as much as history. It is also a moment when, through this legislation, we are going to redeem our civilizational values. And this is what I have discovered in my advocacy around the world, that our Indian civilizational values of Nari Shakti, of Ardhanarishwar, of the concepts of, the 3 Devis, means that women and men are not only equal in their humanity, but also equal in their divinity. But look at the injustice. There has been structural exclusion of women from the assemblies, from the parliament, that decide on the future and the present of all women of India. And what do we have? 80 years, and we only have 14% and less representation in parliament and in the state assemblies. This, for the world's largest and oldest democracy, is a blot that has to be removed. So we have to move into this transformative phase in our evolution as a democracy. And what this will do is not only affect the way we govern, the way we legislate, the way we make policy in an inclusive way. It is about, of course, the arithmetic of our society. Half the world's population, half India's population being only represented by 14% of women. This is not acceptable. So that is what is at stake. It's also about sustainable development. You know, we are on that path of sustainable development, and without women, we cannot achieve all those sustainable development goals that we are committed to, the Sarvodaya, to Antodaya, then the whole environment and climate agenda. Women are absolutely essential to be decision makers in that. It's part of that women-led development of Prime Minister Modi. And I think globally also, he has consecrated the idea of women-led development. So that's why what we do in India matters for Indian women, but it also matters for all women everywhere.
That's right. And also the Prime Minister recently, when he was speaking about Mission Nari Shakti, he had mentioned that when G20 was happening, when India got the presidency, he had to really convince the world that we need to move away from women development to women-led development. So he emphasized. So clearly what India does, it's going to have an impact because we're also positioning ourselves as the voice of Global South. But Ms. Lakshmi Puri, you spoke about women representing half of the world's population. Same is the scenario in India as well. Half of India's population is women, which also translates to half of India's potential. We want to become Viksit by 2047.
Absolutely.
In 2026, we are finally ready to take this bold step. But why has it taken so many years, so many decades? Like, why?
Before I come to the why it has taken so many years, I want to also reaffirm that point that you made, that we cannot reach our 2047 developed country, India becoming a developed country by 2047 goal and destiny without equal participation, voice, and leadership and contribution of women. You know, sabka saath, sabka prayas has to be there, and leadership has to be there. So that is a no-brainer, as has been proved by studies after studies. And also, women's participation in decision-making improves the quality of not only democracy, but it improves the quality of economic growth and delivery of services. So the entire spectrum of economic, political, social enhancement is what women's leadership brings. So it is not only politically expedient, but it is an essential part of India's growth story, our development story. Now, why? Well, the why is very clear. Because there is structural patriarchy. All our institutions, even from before, even the colonial institutions, excluded women. And when we became independent, and despite Mahatma Gandhi's vision about, you know, women being equal partners in the new project of India, we still did not. Of course, we had universal franchise, but we did not address the structural problems and the culture of patriarchy, which is one that resulted in this structural exclusion. So efforts have been made in the last 30 years. So let's look at those efforts. Those efforts included in 1996, 98, 99, and 2003. And every time, procedural issues, and I want to highlight that, procedural issues, coalition interests, vested interests, and also this, if you give reservation to women and quotas, then men will lose. so that was the resistance factor. Of course, it was clothed in procedure. Of course, it was clothed in something else being, oh, let us also give representation to someone else, some other sectional. So sectional interests, partisan interests, and the kind of, the attitude that I think Smriti Irani ji just referred to, that, there is no value being attached to women because women bring value. It's beyond representation, as Prime Minister Modi also said. It's not only an issue of representation, it's what the value added women bring, the lived experience they bring. So that's what has been happening. So every time it was scuttled. And today, with this delimitation-related objections that are being raised by some political parties, it seems like a replay of the same cinema. And I'm therefore very concerned as a gender advocate that they are now trying to scuttle the single most, historic breakthrough for women's rights and political participation and in legislative history. So I think every woman, therefore, must be aware of this. And, if they block this and they are trying to block it, then it is a reflection on their anti-women bias. And that they want to continuously, procrastinate as they have done for the last 30 years. So we cannot allow that.
You've spoken about patriarchy, you've spoken about anti-women bias. I mean, even if, this becomes a reality, it's not that tomorrow morning everything is going to change. The mindset is going to change. I mean, clearly it's the first step, but what will it take from here on to send women actually to parliament? And what will it really take for women to start calling the shots when they reach the parliament? How do we bridge the power deficit? I mean, it's not going to really change overnight. Let's be very practical on this issue.
No, absolutely. See, but the first step is to, of course, go through, as the 2023 bill and act provided, to go through that process of delimitation, census and delimitation. But in those 3 years, you have to also do groundwork. And that means that you have to prepare the political parties. We have to change their culture. We have to let women become part of the networks within political parties, which are so far dominated very much by men. Similarly, we have to also provide the training. We have to have institutions becoming gender responsive, all the parliamentary institutions. And we have to prepare the reservoirs of women, potential women candidates. And here I want to make a very big generational point. Why is this moment important also? We are the most youth-rich country in the world and in history. And today, young women, I was just looking at some statistics, from 18 to 29, there are 100 million young women voters. And if you take the total, if you take it to 35, then we are looking at a 250 million figure. Now, through this kind of reform, you are bringing the young women into empowered status, political empowerment, and also, getting them to start early, to see this as a vocation. Being in politics, I have been told, I'm not in politics, But I have been told by women who are from grassroots up. We did a program, in fact, UN Women did a program with the 3 million grassroots women leaders in India at the village and Jilla Parishad level, who, felt empowered, and they said, "Hum pehle mahila thi, aam mahila thi, ab hum khas mahila ho gayi," because of the quota. You see, that is what is so important. So one reservoir you have of these 3 million women who are ready, but who's going up, who's climbing the ladder has been blocked because of no quotas have worked at that level. So it shows that it will work at the higher level as well. So that is one. And the other aspect that is there is that we will be able to tap young women at the inceptional stage, and it will be therefore a multi-generational push for political empowerment. And then political empowerment also involves preparing the electorate. They should be prepared to see women not as an exceptional leader, exceptional in terms of course, value, but not her leadership not as an exception, but a rule and something that is valued. So that change, preparing all these, the constituencies, how constituencies are organized, the political processes at the ground level, that will really turn reform into revolution.
Given that
as you
we
rightly.
have a demographic dividend as well.
So that is the other part of this.
Right.
Young women brought into this will also have a cascading effect on the demographic, are reaping the demographic dividend, which India is uniquely placed to do today.
Okay. You understand, this issue from a global perspective also. So I would like to ask you, if you compare global gender equality agenda with India and the steps that India is really taking right now, where do we stand in your opinion?
You see, I'm not going to go into the gender equality indexes and all these because they have different metrics.
On women reservations, say, sending women to parliament, where are we as compared to the world?
You see, the global average of women in parliament is 27%, and we are 14%. So obviously, and that is one of the metrics. So obviously, we have to do better. And we have to make sure, and this is a truism, anywhere, whether it's in the family, it's in the community, and I've seen it in every country that we have worked on the ground on this quota, or either it's a quota in parliament and state assemblies, or it is, political party quotas and mandatory political parties being asked to put up women candidates, a certain proportion. So there are different ways of what is called temporary special measures that are taken in order to ensure there is gender parity. And 33% is the critical mass. From there, it creates a certain momentum, and then you achieve 50%, as has happened at the ground level, at the local, at the panchayat and the Jilla Parishad level. So that will also happen here. But, so what I'm saying is, what is really important is that today India has been leading, particularly as a lighthouse, it is emerging in women-led development, in terms of, particularly for the global south, in terms of the kind of women, intentional and targeted women supportive programs that have been implemented. Not only the vision, but the implementation that has been done by Prime Minister Modi. And it has been really seen as an exemplar for the world, whether it is, the targeted programs or whether it is transversal programs for housing, poverty reduction, financial empowerment, entrepreneurship, every aspect, portion, nutrition, education, health, and digital. Yes, absolutely, and technological. So every aspect, the way, intentional way, and also putting the resources where your vision is. That is very important. And that's where we have again shown the way. And therefore, we must continue to show that leadership. And this, the passage of this bill will ensure that India becomes a lighthouse in regard to women's representation in the highest legislative bodies that will make sure that women are not at the receiving end of laws and policies that determine their lives, but that they are at the helm of it.
One last question. What is that one thing that you're really excited about, in this next decade of Nari Shakti and the steps that we've taken so far?
Well, I'm very excited about this particular big leap and the big bang that we need to break through this structural exclusion that has been there, because structural exclusions don't end organically. They have to be broken. So that is something that is very exciting for me, and how that rolls out, as we were discussing earlier. But also what is very exciting is women's participation in technology 4.0 and the digital revolution, all of that. Because combining also that will complement women's participation in political life, in the economy, as women entrepreneurs, as professionals in different works, different areas, in vocations, and also, as I said, in tech 4.0.
Women have shattered the proverbial glass ceilings in many sectors. From your experience at the United Nations, where do you see most entrenched glass ceilings that still exist for women?
I think, there are glass ceilings, and then there are occupational glass walls. So I think both need to be broken together. And they are happening even in India. Look at India. I can talk of the world as well. Australia just had its first naval chief as a woman. But look at India. Now we are having women leaders in the Army, Navy, and Air Force. We have now, women pilots, we have the largest women pilots. In STEM, 43% STEM graduates. So there are these, as you said, proverbial glass occupational walls being broken, and that is very important. As much as when you talk about glass ceilings, how much does a woman rise in that profession or that calling? And that, again, is happening, but it could be faster. And certainly women on boards, women-led companies, and also moving from, this whole small SME universe that women entrepreneurs are trapped in, from moving from there to to managing big enterprises, and which have a critical mass both nationally and globally. Those are the kind of horizons I think we are moving towards. And I think the world is also trying, but India's, as I said, what happens in India matters to the world more than ever before.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Ms. Lakshmi Puri. Wonderful speaking with you. Thank you so much.